Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Straight Shot Politics, where we will provide you with accurate information about what is happening in the world of local and state politics in Ohio, as well as what's happening nationally. I'm Lisa Chafee, and my co-host today is Jim Leeser.
Well, hello, everybody.
Joining us today is State Representative Brian Stewart. He's currently serving his second term as State Representative for 12th Ohio House District, which includes all of Madison and Pickaway counties, and the western part of Franklin County. In addition to his career in public service, Representative Stewart maintains a successful law practice representing businesses and individuals as the owner of the law office of Brian Stewart, LLC in Circleville. And he is admitted to practice before the federal U.S. District Courts in Ohio, the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, the U.S. Tax Court, and has also represented clients before the U.S. Trademark Trial and Appeal Board. In Ohio, Representative Stewart has litigated cases in more than a dozen different counties and in multiple appellate districts all across the state. He is also an Army veteran, and he enlisted after experiencing 9/11 as a high school senior. He is an infantry veteran of the Iraq War and earned the Combat Infantryman's Badge, in addition to twice receiving the Army Commendation Medal. Following his service, he returned to school and earned both his bachelor's and law degree from The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. Representative, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your service. And we want to talk to you about Issue 1.
Well, it's great to be here. Honored to be on the first episode. That's pretty extra special. So appreciate what you're doing and happy to be here.
So this is the second go around for Issue 1. Tell us the history on this.
Sure. So, people ask me, why now? And I've said I've been in favor of this for more than a decade, but I introduced it in my first term. And we introduced this at the end of the last General Assembly in the lame duck session, really just kind of looking ahead and seeing what's coming down the pike. You have this Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, which is a left-wing group nationwide whose goal is to do one thing and one thing only: raise money in blue states and use that money to try to buy policy in red states that they couldn't do otherwise. Now, for a whole host of reasons, we were not able to get that passed in the lame duck session. So, I have always believed there's substantial support for it amongst Republicans and independents and even some soft Democrats. And so I introduced it again the first week of this General Assembly with an eye toward it being, frankly, on the May ballot. And, we've sort of, it's been a winding road to get to the ballot, but here we are. And I'm excited for Ohioans to get the opportunity to vote on what is really an important question of what should be in our Constitution, what should not be in our Constitution, how it should be amended, how it should not be amended.
To me, it's common sense. We have to protect the borders of Ohio and Ohioans. It doesn't matter Democrat, Independent, Republican. We all should have the same focus in mind by doing this, and this affects a wide range of issues and topics. So I thank you for stepping out and doing this, and I think it's a long time coming.
I appreciate it. It's a debate we've been having in this state for more than 100 years, right? I mean, in 1912, this always gets thrown around in all these articles about Issue 1 is, in 1912, Ohioans, adopted this. They did. That's because we had, all the progressive movement nationwide sort of, parachuted into Ohio. You had William Jennings Bryan, you had, Woodrow Wilson. These are not the kind of, elected officials that I take my inspiration from, but they thought that this was a good idea. and but it was a controversial idea. It was one of the most hotly debated items out of that convention. One of the closest election results when it was ultimately adopted by Ohioans, and then it's been debated ever since. This has been a bipartisan idea as recently as 5 years ago, because I really do believe that this actually does benefit everybody. To make a constitution such that it requires, a higher threshold, broad-based, bipartisan support, that helps everybody, right? Constitutions are supposed to be made up of the things that unite us, not the fringe ideas that divide us. And I think that that's why everybody that we get a chance to talk to really is pretty open-minded to the idea of 60%. We live under a constitution every single day, the federal constitution that's protected with a supermajority amendment, a supermajority requirement for amendment. And so, we think this is nothing really new other than the fact that, Democrats want to buy policy that they think will be more difficult under issue 1.
So we know that there's a huge amount of opposition that's being very vocal and, quite frankly, just telling blatant lies about what this will do to our Constitution.
Right.
So let's talk about some of those.
Yeah.
One of them is that it will end the majority rule and it undermines the one person, one vote.
I think it's absurd. I think it is that is a glass, far more than half empty approach to this issue. I mean, candidly, you still have one person and one vote when you go to show up, right? I mean, issue 1 is either going to pass or it's not. I've never really understood that one, honestly. I mean, the United States, they're essentially saying that they believe the United States Constitution is an anti-democratic document that tramples on, the rights of the people, which I think is absurd. It's more absurd, too, when you consider that all of the groups saying this require a supermajority threshold essentially to amend all of their own documents. When it comes to keeping their own house in order, they understand that you don't want your governing document to be changed willy-nilly. You want it to be, have a little more requisite stability than just a simple 50% plus 1.
So along with that, one of the other arguments is that it is ruining, well, you already answered, we're ruining democracy, but that it's going to prevent the normal average citizen from getting legislation passed and introducing or amendments. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the myth of the truly grassroots constitutional amendment that is successful in Ohio. Look, for better and worse, they really don't exist. Okay, it is a tall order to get constitutional amendments proposed and onto the ballot and ultimately approved. And so what you've seen is, there really are no grassroots driven constitutional amendments. They're all paid for and bankrolled in one fashion or another by somebody else. In some cases, it's a group in Ohio, but in many, many cases, it's groups around the United States. It's groups that are, overwhelmingly left wing, trying to buy policy that they couldn't get through a legislature. And so, the people who are concerned about that are frankly just mad that they're going to have to dig a little deeper into their own pocket to try to buy policy. They will, if somebody wants to bankroll some of these campaigns, they're going to do it, and they'll get the signatures, whether issue 1 passes or not. But 60% requires that ultimately they've got to convince people, and they can't convince people at 60% for some of these terrible ideas. That's why they're so opposed.
Yeah, so I've been telling people, so we're virtually just saying right now it takes 5 out of 10 people to pass it.
Correct.
What we want is 6 out of 10.
Correct.
In all 88 counties. And that's another argument that's been put out there is
Right.
that, then that means one county could just ruin the whole thing. And it's just, they're just mixing everything up. And it's so aggravating to hear their arguments. How do you respond to the average everyday person who is not versed in the legalese?
Well, I think the first thing we remind people of is we don't want. I haven't encountered anybody during this campaign who says, no, I like the idea of corporations and left-wing billionaires being able to buy policy in the Ohio Constitution. Nobody says that. right? Because it's an incredibly unpopular, undemocratic idea, right? And so it's happening, right? In 2015, you had a group that literally solicited with a prospectus investors in an effort to amend Ohio's constitution. It's literally for sale. And so, I think the average Ohioan across all political stripes does not like the idea of our Constitution being for sale. And if you look at the track record, it has been, right? $50 million spent on the last 3 constitutional amendment campaigns combined. That tells you 2 things. Amending our Constitution is a lucrative business, and these groups see Ohio as an easy mark. And issue 1 is how we stop that, right? You will still have the opportunity under issue 1 to amend the Constitution. We're not eliminating the ability to propose outside citizen, whether you want to call it special interest driven or whether you want to call it citizen initiated, we are not eliminating that avenue to amend the Constitution. All we're saying is that if you have an idea that you think is so good that it should be enshrined in the Ohio Constitution, essentially forever, you should be able to get 60% of the vote. And if you can't, that's probably an idea that needs to go through the legislature, where it has checks and balances and give and take, and we, take the piñata, bat to it, and we make sure that whatever that policy proposal is, A, that it's been vetted, and B, that we can change it, right? If things change on the ground, facts, circumstances, how many things in 2023 look different than they did in 2017? Okay? And if it's in a statute, we can change that tomorrow. If it's in the Constitution, we're generally stuck with it forever.
See right there, the next big lie, that covered the next big lie that they're splitting out there, and that's that issue 1 is about empowering the wealthy special interest. We're always going to have the special interest groups out there. And, passing this is actually going to curtail it a little bit or make them work a little bit harder. That's my understanding. Am I correct on that?
I think you're right on track. And here's an important distinction. You'll have people in this campaign that say, well, why don't you just tell people they can't spend money on these elections? Or isn't it true that, you have, there's folks on the yes side who are spending money to try to in this campaign as well? Well, guys, whether I like it or not, I tend to like it. The United States Supreme Court has issued Citizen United, right? And has said that spending money on campaigns is protected political speech, and generally speaking, you can do it. Okay. Now there's, like anything, there's pros and cons with that, but on balance, I think that is certainly preferable than where we had before, which essentially was that, only certain groups could spend money on politics and other groups could not. Right. So we're going to change that. I mean, absent the Supreme Court revisiting that decision, that is the law, right? Which says that you can spend the money. So the best way to your point, to curb that power is to require them to actually go persuade more people, right? Rather than limiting speech, limiting participation, meddling in how, these elections are conducted, just set the bar at 60% to say, look, if you've got a good idea, whether you spend $10 or $10 million, you can get your idea in the Constitution if you convince 60% of your fellow citizens to support it. And I would note 60% is not an unreasonable threshold to have to reach.
Not at all.
14 of the last 21 constitutional amendments adopted in Ohio were by a 60% plus vote margin, right? Good ideas will pass. Bad ideas will be easier to stop. That is the beauty of issue 1 and a 60% threshold.
You just stated 14 of the last 21 amendments. How many times has the Constitution of Ohio been amended compared to the U.S. Constitution?
It's a jaw-dropping stat. I looked it up and did the research before my floor speech, and when I said it, people were kind of dumbfounded. The United States Constitution has been amended just 27 times since 1791. The Ohio Constitution, by contrast, 172 amendments and counting. 172 amendments. It averages out, and I believe in my research, that's really only even back to like 1851, right? So we are averaging essentially an amendment per year. at this point over the life of the document. That is not what anybody envisions a constitution should be about, right? The Constitution, guiding principles, the broad principles that unite us. Everything else is designed to go through the legislature. And so I tell people when they want to complain, like, well, I couldn't get my constitutional amendment for X passed with a 60% threshold. So you're just telling me that can never be addressed. No, I'm saying go to your legislature, use the elected, democratically elected republic that we have, lobby your representative, let them do their work, let them see if the idea has legs. No issue is off the table. It's just a question of whether the best avenue is the Constitution or a statute, but everything is still on the table.
Thank you. I think that breaks it down for everybody. That number, 172 times, is a number that I had heard, and it was hard for me to get my head around it. And people that I talked to, I had the numbers transpired. I said it was 127 times, and that still made people like,
right.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's a lot on its own.
Now when I do tell them the correct number, 172 times, that's really going to set them back. And it amazes me that people get upset over trying to set a standard to do a 60% vote. I mean, this is the Constitution of Ohio. It's not just a rule book. This is
right.
what we need to govern our state by. It's
right.
an important document. So I thank you for what you've done for going forward. And, those that want to get other things through, call their reps.
Right.
And talk to their reps. That's the beginning stages.
That's really what this is about. I mean, we have a decision to make in August or today. You can vote today. But are we going to control our own destiny here in Ohio? Are we going to, put some reasonable protections around the Ohio Constitution that many of our competitor states have already done, by the way? Arizona, Colorado, Florida. I take no joy in saying this as a Ohio legislator, but those states are growing at a faster rate than we are, right? These are the states we're competing against for jobs and investment and young people and all of these things that we would like to see. They've all adopted a 60% or 55% threshold, right? They have made these reasonable protections to say, we're going to decide for ourselves what should be in our Constitution and what should not. We're not going to let it be, Mike Bloomberg, George Soros, whoever, Hollywood billionaires, spending money to try to buy policy here that they couldn't get done otherwise.
So you've been accused of bringing this up now to prevent the abortion initiative from getting on the ballot. What's your response to those people?
Well, when I introduced the Ohio Constitution Protection Amendment in November of last year, there was no abortion amendment. Now, certainly, there's always talk of amendments here or there, but it didn't exist. There's no, are they going to go in November of 2023 or November of 2024 or not at all, whatever it may be. This has been introduced to address a wide variety of amendments, including, but certainly not limited to, abortion and redistricting and qualified immunity and ranked choice voting and, the minimum wage, on and on and on and on. The left is most focused on abortion because that is their overriding policy objective in all things. It is not the overriding policy objective of issue one, or a lot of the folks who support issue one. Now, certainly, I'm pro-life. I'm 100% pro-life. Been endorsed by every pro-life organization in the state. I'm voting no in November. But if there was no abortion amendment, I would still be trying to get issue one enacted. I think it's good policy. Again, it's not just a Republican benefit.
Right.
Okay, it's a benefit for everyone if somebody would open their eyes and look at this issue looking, even a month, down the road instead of just at the one issue in the latter half of 2023 that is right in front of their face.
One of the questions that quite a few people have asked me is, if this passes on August 8th, the abortion initiative and the marijuana initiative that's going to be on the ballot in November, we know that the abortion initiative at least has pretty much going to be on there because they've gotten way more than what they needed in signatures on the petitions. How does that, if this passes, if issue 1 passes, how does that affect the November election? Will the abortion initiative required 60% to get on the ballot at that time?
So I just want to be
to
really
be on the
specific.
Constitution.
Yeah, so I want to be specific. If the abortion amendment gets the requisite number of signatures and is going to be on the November ballot, and if issue 1 passes in August, then the abortion amendment would require a 60% vote margin to be approved. Okay? The marijuana initiated statute is entirely different.
Okay.
Different kettle of fish. They are doing what's called an initiated statute, which means it's less signatures, and it's basically enacting a law, right? That difference we talked about between the constitutional provision and a law. They are essentially saying, hey, General Assembly, we wish you would have passed a law allowing us to have marijuana. You didn't, so we're going to pass it for you. Okay? And so issue 1 has no bearing whatsoever on the marijuana initiated statute in November.
Okay.
One other thing I want to mention, because I think it's the less discussed part of issue 1, but it's this idea of a cure period, right? So right now the abortion amendment backers have turned in more signatures than they would be required to get. But as in most of these, signature gathering operations, a lot of those signatures are going to be tossed out as invalid. They're not registered. They're not living where they said, whatever it may be. Under the law today, however, if they fail, they do not comply with the law, we give them a second chance, right? We say, well, sorry you didn't follow the rules, but we're going to give you more time to get a second bite at the apple. I think that's kind of silly. If as a political candidate or anybody else trying to get anything on the ballot, you don't get a cure period. Candidates don't. People putting local initiatives on don't. But when it comes to meddling in our Constitution, we say, well, we'll give you another shot. Issue 1 says no. If you are going to try to amend our governing document, get it right the first time, right? Just like every candidate running for every local office, township office, county office, or et cetera, follow the rules the first time, right? And if you screw it up, you're out. It's good for the goose, good for the gander.
I agree. Now, you mentioned qualified immunity. So what I'm scared about, to be honest with you, is if issue 1 fails, what's coming down the pike? And I've heard that there is a movement to do away with qualified immunity. Can you elaborate on that?
You took my question.
Sorry. Great minds think alike.
But that's all right. We needed to get that question out.
Yeah, I mean it's a big deal. You're looking at qualified immunity, and I'm going to be very careful how far I waded into this because this is not exactly my area. But essentially, it is saying that police officers and law enforcement folks cannot be held personally liable, except in very narrow circumstances, for their activities on the job, right? If a Hilliard police officer arrests somebody who says, I didn't want to be arrested, they may have a grievance with the department or the government, but they don't get to go put a lien on that officer's house.
Right.
Okay. And so this has just been generally kind of understood as a doctrine to allow our law enforcement officers to do their job without fear of being sued personally and being held personally liable every time that they do it. Well, unsurprisingly, the left, the defund the police left, wants to do away with qualified immunity. Okay. And so there's a group, they've been in all the hearings, they've been, vocally opposed to issue 1. So is the Communist Party of Ohio, by the way, if that tells you some of the bedfellows lining up against this. But, we're having a tough time recruiting law enforcement personnel in Central Ohio anyway, right? I won't belabor all the, read your newspaper, but if you think it's hard now, wait until we pass a constitutional amendment that somehow makes them personally liable when they arrest, a drug dealer that doesn't want to be arrested, right? There are some truly bizarre policy proposals out there that we in Ohio should not have to play chicken with on the ballot every 2 years, right? I mean, some people say, well, but that would be voted down. Maybe. It depends how much money is spent. And we've seen the misrepresentation of issue 1. We've seen the misrepresentations of the abortion amendment. It'll be the same sort of thing. And we should not be in a position of having to sweat it every 2 years, whether we're going to be saddled with these bizarre left-wing policies in our Constitution.
We're not that far removed from that being the hot topic, qualified immunity. 3 short years ago, 2020, that was everyone talking about qualified immunity on officers. And they're out there protecting us and our families on a daily basis. We need to protect them. It would just qualified immunity would just open the door for them to be sued. And that's just, it may not be the hot topic now, but it'll come back around.
Exactly.
It will come back around, and they will gain enough momentum to try to push it through. So,
I mean, every election cycle, there is some bizarre idea like this. And in the past, all the newspapers would come out and say, oh, this is a terrible idea, and vote no. And by the way, like, why do we do it in Ohio this way? Why is this happening? We shouldn't have all these, look at these nefarious groups, pushing these amendments. So now we actually put a proposal on the table to deal with it. And those same newspapers are, gnashing teeth and clutching pearls. The Columbus Dispatch in 2017 and 2018 endorsed raising the threshold for approval of constitutional amendments. But, now that would conflict with their greater concern, which is we can never disagree with Democrat orthodoxy. So now that's all given away, and they're against issue 1. But, this has been a problem. We've now finally proposed a solution, and I'm enjoying having the debate.
I'm old enough to remember when the Dispatch was actually a good newspaper.
So the abortion initiative, let's get down and dirty on that, because it is the hot button right now. And we know, as you already told us, abortion is not the reason you've introduced this amendment.
Right.
What scares me about the abortion initiative that a lot of people don't understand is it's not just about abortion. The way they have meticulously worded this bill, they never say the word woman. They say individual. They say it's about reproductive rights. So what's going to happen is, if this abortion initiative passes, children will be able to get transgender surgery because it is their reproductive right a boy's reproductive right to remove his penis to become a girl, and they can do it. They'll be able to do it without parental consent. A 10-year-old girl who happens to, God forbid, get raped and get pregnant, her rapist could take her to get the abortion, and parents would never know about it. And there's so many other things in this that, if it were to go into the Constitution, and let's say, God willing, the SAFE Act bill passes, which will make it illegal for doctors to prescribe the hormone blockers, puberty blockers, and to perform trans surgery on minors, that abortion in the Constitution would negate that. So what do you say to anyone who is just focused on those issues that are saying it's all reproductive rights, it's our body, our choice?
Well, if this radical abortion amendment were passed, Ohio would be vastly worse off from a pro-life standpoint than we were even under Roe v. Wade. Even under Roe v. Wade, we had parental notification laws. We had parental consent laws. We had, a lot of states at least had bans up to, 15 or 22 weeks. Okay. Under this amendment, there are no limits whatsoever. Every single provision has a loophole. Every single provision has a weasel clause. Every provision has an ability to get out of it. Essentially, under this amendment, the abortionist becomes the chief and final arbiter of all things relating to abortion. If they say it's okay, there's no law that can trump them, right? And so we've been sounding the alarm on this. I remember when the text of the amendment came in, I was sitting in my office. I read it in a minute and identified very quickly all the things that you just talked about. right? All of the weasel words, all of the sort of carefully, including but not limited to, right? That is because in Michigan, this same group explicitly put in the Constitution that you cannot infringe on sterilization. Okay? Now, they were at least politically savvy enough to know that, enshrining sterilization of minors in the Ohio Constitution might be tough sledding. So they took it out explicitly, but they left enough room in the verbiage to protect it all the same, right? So it is a monumentally dishonest document. And I think that even if you are not if you're a voter who's not as pro-life as me and Lisa, okay, the overwhelming majority of people still oppose late-term abortion. That would be legal and constitutionally protected under this amendment. Most people still support parental notification and consent laws. Those would arguably be invalid under this amendment. And heck, even 60% of Democrats don't think that minor children should be getting sex change operations, which would also be constitutionally protected under this amendment. So it's bad news from top to bottom. And I do hope that Ohioans see it for what it is. And, locking this type of policy away in the Constitution is exactly what has been the problem for 50 years under Roe. These issues should stay in the legislature where they can be changed, amended, adapt to facts on the ground, and change with the times.
So last 30 seconds, give your quick pep talk to tell everybody just, quick 2-3 points on why they should vote yes on issue 1.
Issue 1 is how we stop radical out-of-state special interest groups from buying policy in the Ohio Constitution that they could not get otherwise. It is a reasonable protection that multiple other states have already adopted. It is a way to ensure that our Constitution is made up of the broad principles that unite us, not the fringe ideas that divide us. 32 states don't allow for constitutional amendments by outside groups at all. Under issue 1, we will preserve that ability, but we will put a very reasonable safeguard of requiring broad-based support at 60%.
Representative Brian Stewart, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on our inaugural podcast on Straight Shot Politics. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Get out and vote.